Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Tanner O'Brien. I'm a senior partner here at Action Coach in Central Texas. And today I'm sitting down with my guest, Alex Blum, who is the co-founder and CEO of Applied Bioplastics. Alex, first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to dive in, talk a little bit about business, talk a little bit about, this journey into entrepreneurship and kind of all the stuff that comes along with it. So appreciate you taking some time. But why don't we just start with a little bit of background? First and foremost, tell us what is Applied Bioplastics, and then maybe give us the high level version of kind of how you came about co-founding that company, and we'll
For
dive
sure.
in from there.
I think I'm going to do that backwards because the founding story is pretty interesting compared to what we do today. But I'll start there. So my background, I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin. Decided never to grow up, so I've never left Austin after that. Other than for business travel and whatnot. But as far as living, I'm here in Austin, about 5 minutes from the university I graduated from 12 years ago. Anyhow, so I was a salesman for the majority of my career. I've worked for Amazon, Oracle, and two startups, which are WP Engine and Thousand Eyes. In 2017, I was recently divorced and closed Visa on a massive network monitoring deal with Thousand Eyes. This multi-million dollar deal. I got a $500,000 paycheck. Now, as a recent divorcee and a debt-free person, because I worked through college and had some privilege, I decided, I've always wanted to make a difference in the world, but I'm not dumb enough to go start my own company or try to do something crazy like that. So I'm going to donate the $500,000 to charity. So I decided to do that in 2017. I spoke with a friend of mine from Bangladesh, who's sadly passed away since then. But he said, you should come to Bangladesh. 2 million refugees just crossed our borders, and they really need help. So I flew over there with him and ended up being the first American with boots on the ground in the Rohingya genocide. I beat Angelina Jolie by 9 months. We filmed a documentary in that camp. It's called Blossoms from Ash, now available on Apple TV and Amazon Prime. Won several major awards, obviously, and got picked up by these streaming services. But while I was raising money for that film, or attempting to raise money, I was really bad at that. I don't think I raised a single cent. But regardless, while I was in Bangladesh trying to garner interest for funding this film, I was introduced to a fellow named Dr. Mubarak Ahmed Khan. Now, Dr. Khan is award-winning scientist. He's just won the equivalent of the Presidential Medal of Freedom for Bangladesh just a month ago. And he had spent most of his retirement working on composite materials using a agricultural waste that is common to Bangladesh called jute. He showed me a composite building material that he had designed using this plant, and it was amazing. It was very high insulation values, very strong, very cheap, and very durable. And I said, why isn't this everywhere as a housing composite? And he said to me, well, I'm a chemist, not a businessman. And I said, well, funny thing about that, I'm a businessman, not a chemist. Why don't we put two and two together? So he sold me the IP, and I hired him, and I started a company dedicated to building bioplastic refugee shelters, because that was the original plan, was to go help refugees. About a year later, I was introduced to Dr. Chen, who heads the material science department at the University of Texas at Austin, who introduced me to Dr. Lawrence Derzal, who's the Lifetime Achievement winner in biocomposites. He advised me that if we converted one into the other, one into a different type of plastic, we could not only affect the entire plastic industry, but decarbonize one of the largest sources of atmospheric carbon in the world, which is consumer plastics. So we hired a bunch of really smart people way smarter than me, PhDs, who then took Dr. Khan's invention, ran with it, and created what we do today, alongside the refugee housing, which we still do. Been very successful with that. We're planning on building over 200 million homes over the next 20 years. In the meantime, however, we're decarbonizing the plastic industry. What we figured out how to do is take Dr. Khan's agricultural waste, expand that portfolio to nearly every kind of agricultural waste in the world, and then make his proprietary plastic work in injection molding machines, which is the vast majority of plastic that's out there today. So what we have now is a plastic composite that can be made in any standard plastic making machine that is less expensive. We're the first bioplastic in the world that is less expensive than oil-based commodity plastic. It can be made by the exact same companies. It can be used by the exact same companies. It's actually a little bit stronger, than the standard plastic, and it's also compatible with recycled and bioresins. So we're able to be applied to the entire plastics industry, lowering their prices, lowering their carbon footprint, and reducing their microplastics footprint at end of life.
Dang, that is awesome. So I'm gonna kind of ask a few questions around that first, and then we'll kind of circle around for some of the other questions I always love to dive into with regards to kind of running the business and things like that.
For sure.
Um, but I think as we look at how do we clarify for some of the audience and really like get some, yeah, I don't know, into some of the nitty gritty. So customer, like who your business serves. Let's just start with that one.
Certainly.
Especially for the I guess newer part of the business, not the refugee kind of
Yeah,
shelter
that one's
side of
pretty
it.
obvious. Yeah.
But for this other piece, like who is the end you like who would you be selling to? Kind of what does that customer look like for your business?
Sure. Well, the end customer is you and me, right? We're the users of all the plastic objects. I mean, if I look at the scene behind you, your shades are plastic. The cover for your shades is plastic. The handle for your shades is plastic. Your headphones are too, and your shirt is likely made partially out of nylon plastic, as is mine, right? So we are the ones who benefit. We are the consumers of this. However, obviously, that's not how the plastic world works. So I'm going to explain the plastics value chain just to make it make sense for the listeners,
Ooh, yeah.
and then I'll say where we fit there.
Yeah.
So essentially, plastic is made as actually a byproduct of fuel and oil production, right? So the companies that originate the original plastic are typically Shell, Exxon, BP, those kinds of guys. Now, the thing is that the plastic that they produce is essentially raw plastic. It's not specialized. It can be used in some applications, and it is used in some applications, but for most applications, you like the fact that plastic is, well, plastic. It's changeable. It's moldable, right? But you want it to have certain physical properties or colors or, resistances or whatever else like that. So what happens next usually is that the pellet created by the fuel company goes to a set of businesses called the compounders. The compounders take that raw plastic and a bunch of other chemicals like plasticizers, elasticizers, colorants, dyes, UV stabilizers, fire retardants, and many other types of things, and they compound in a machine called a twin screw extruder that plastic with what's called an additive package, right? So once that additive package is in, you've got a plastic that now does a specific job. That plastic pellet then moves on to an injection molder. The injection molder heats up the pellets and then pushes them at high pressure through a nozzle that goes into a mold that is shaped like the object they're trying to create. Once that's cooled down, that gets popped out of the mold, sanded off if there's any little bits of it that need to be sanded off, and sent off to the manufacturer, who takes a bunch of objects that have been injection molded, assembles them into a product, and then off to the brand for packaging, marketing, and all that good stuff. And it ends up in our hands, yours and mine, right? So that's the plastics value chain. Where we fit is that we license our technologies at the compounder level, right? So we've got our own proprietary additive package that enables the use of cellulosic waste in the plastic production process. And not just a little bit. There's many other biocomposite companies out there. They're doing 5 to 8 to maybe 10% if they're feeling brave in terms of agricultural waste. We can do 85%. That's the differentiator right there. Our average is between 30 and 40%, but that's more than double the maximum of the other folks, right? And so essentially, we have figured out some proprietary chemistry that enables cellulose to go through that really small nozzle I was talking about, and not clump, because that's the problem with cellulose. It clumps with itself. So natural fiber composites aren't new. We're not the first ones to invent this, but they're primarily used for profile extrusion. Now, profile extrusion is making fence posts and house siding. Usually the nozzle's like this big or like that big, right? So it doesn't matter if the cellulose clumps because the nozzle's big, it's not going to clog. For injection molding, it's exactly the opposite. The nozzle's really small. So it really, really matters if it clogs. So we've had to do some really cool chemistry to make sure that it won't bond with itself while it's passing through the nozzle. But when it's done passing through the nozzle, we do want it to bond with itself because that makes the plastic stronger. So our proprietary chemistry has enabled this. We also work directly with injection molders where we'll say, pay a compounder to make some of our plastic that will then be purchased by the injection molder. In most other cases, though, because the cost of goods sold, or COGS, of our plastic is lower than oil-based plastic, we're licensing our processes to these compounders so that they can make more money while making a more sustainable product. See, this is the problem, Tanner, with the bioplastic industry as a whole, is that people assume that businesses are willing to pay more for sustainability. It could not be further from the truth. And that's not to say that these companies are evil or bad. It's just capitalism, right? Like you need low cost of supplies and high cost of your products, right? So you're not going to go out of your way to lose money just to be more sustainable. So when I decided that this was what the company was also going to do besides the refugee shelters, I made 3 rules based on my study of old bioplastics companies and why they've failed. I mean, 35 years, we're only 1% of the total plastics market. My God, pathetic, right? Here's the things they do wrong. They overprice their materials, and that's really not their fault. Some of the techniques are just very expensive. So, you're going to be more pricey. The second one is when they fail to sell their materials in that way, they attempt to build those custom machines that they already developed into a business where they're selling the machines to other plastic makers. Thing is, plastic making machines are modular. They do not depreciate. If a part breaks, you go get another part. You never need to replace the whole thing. So nobody's looking to buy any new equipment, and they never will. Right. So that business then fails. And then the last mistake they do is they go to their investors, they ask for $10 million, and then they build a factory. Now, that might seem good because they can lower their unit costs through volume, blah, blah, blah. But the problem actually is that geo-locks their business. Plastic is a global business. You may not have a customer in Illinois where you put your factory is, right? You might not have a customer in Nebraska. So suddenly you're shipping the bioplastic that you worked really hard to make cheap across an ocean, and now it's not cheap anymore, and now nobody wants to buy your plastic, right? So we've done the exact opposite of all these. We focused on making our plastic less expensive. Number one. Number two, we'll never sell any machines because it works in the existing machines. And number three, we'll never start a physical facility, right? Because our goal is to license to every plastic compounder on earth so that they can easily adopt this technology, start making more profitable and cleaner plastic at the same time. And there's no geo-locking. We're worldwide already.
I That is awesome. You had answered so many questions for me in like that one piece that it's so fantastic, and I appreciate kind of walking through the value chain of what plastics looks like. I think, for a lot of folks that aren't familiar with the industry and some of the things that y'all do, being able to kind of really, kind of learn that process along the way, and then like how does business fit into it,
Yeah,
I think is really fascinating. So I appreciate you kind of walking through that.
of course.
With kind of knowing who kind of that general target market is, then I'm sure it's very different for y'all than it is for, say the ice cream shop down the street in terms of what marketing looks like. But how do you get in front of those that you're going to be serving and providing, this service and materials and licensing to? What does marketing look like for your business?
That is going to have a terrible answer, which is that we don't. We don't market. We've never marketed. I have a higher number of followers on LinkedIn than the company does, like double. And some say that my story is inspirational. We can kind of get into my personal stuff here later if you'd like. But the company reposts things I post on LinkedIn, and that's about it. We've used some wonderful technologies like Buzz AI to reach out to investors and potentially direct customers. But here's the thing. We've recently been certified by a mandatory federal buying program run by the USDA, which means that if you're a federal contractor, you have to buy my plastic. You don't have a choice. So soon we'll be hiring, at the conclusion of the raise that we're raising now, we'll be hiring a number of salespeople to call on those customers within that program. But the other thing is, despite zero marketing, we currently have a sales pipeline that is in excess of $770 million ARR. And part of the reason is we win a lot of contests. We were recently named Startup of the Year at South by Southwest. That's the second time we've won South by Southwest. We also won in 2021. We were named the most promising venture in the polymer space by all the really big oil companies in 2020. We won composites manufacturing. We won an advanced manufacturing competition in Berlin, another one in Kansas City. We've entered 36 contests and won 28 of them. So we get a lot of inbound as a result.
Dang. Well, for those that are watching that need to connect some of the dots, all of that is 100% marketing. It's just a very different style of marketing than
For sure.
most of us get to do on a regular basis. But that is fantastic. I mean, congratulations on all of the accolades and the things that y'all have kind of come together. And yeah, it's fantastic to get some government contract type stuff where like that's some of
Picky
the deals that,
customers.
yeah, absolutely. Um, well, that's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit then. Let's, I guess take a step back. Let's talk a little bit about, this journey to get here. Some of the lessons I guess you've learned along the way. Let's just start with an easy-ish one. You've got the title of CEO in the business. What does it mean to be the CEO of your company today?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question because I didn't start out as the CEO. I went to University of Texas and got a liberal arts degree in rhetoric. So I'm not sure you can tell. My skills have degraded over the years, but my co-founder got a degree in business from a well-reputed school, and interned at Disney and I believe Goldman Sachs and stuff like that. So he's the guy with the pedigree. I'm the guy with the passion. So it wouldn't make any sense at first to us to have the guy with the passion and no idea what he's doing run the business. So my co-founder started doing the CEO role, and I started off. It's actually kind of funny because there's several of these nowadays. But 6 years ago, I was the first chief impact officer of any company in the world. And it's sort of amusing. Later on LinkedIn, somebody who also had a CIO title reached out to me and said, "Hey, I wanted to start a group of chief impact officer professionals, and let's like get together and discuss our stuff." We did get together, and we all kind of compared resumes and found that the first one to ever do it was Prince William, other than me. Um, so I sort of made up the role, and I don't, we never really publicized that. So I think it was just maybe a great minds think alike. Lots of people had the idea around the same time. But as we got into the running the company, I ended up being the guy who was pitching all of the investors and at all the contests and things like that, because my co-founder doesn't enjoy doing those things. He enjoys
Mm.
being an operator, right? And so we got some feedback from some investors who were like, it's really effing weird that the guy that we talk to all the time is the impact officer, and the guy that we've like never met is the CEO. Like, why do you guys do that this way? And it's like, well, because we thought that the CEO operates the business. This is first time founderitis here. And that we needed to just find a place for me to vomit my passion everywhere on customers and investors. And they're like, no, you guys have it backwards. The CEO is the evangelist, the COO runs the company. And I was just like, okay, got it. So we swapped that out. So what I do is I pitch investors. I do all the competitions that we do. I do a lot of travel. I handle most of our HR. Not payroll. That counts as operating the business. And I've got a little bit of I don't remember what it's called. It was like dyslexia for numbers. Like Excel confounds me and like all that kind of stuff. Whereas my co-founder loves doing that stuff. So regardless, long story short, we swapped positions. He's now the chief operating officer. I'm the CEO. And besides raising money and evangelizing for the company, I scout talent. I do interviews, other things like that. I think in a lot of ways, I'm the moral backbone of the business. So finding people who share our values and morals is really important to building a company culture that's going to, persist in the long term.
Mm. So as a first-time founder, I would imagine there's been some lessons learned along the way in terms of building and growing a business.
Sure.
Are there any notable moments or kind of I don't know, highlights even that kind of stand out to you? A time or two that was maybe a roadblock or hurdle that you had to overcome that's kind of helped you become the CEO and the leader that you are today. But
For
anything that
sure.
stands out that's kind of worth sharing with the audience today.
Well, there's a few things that kind of like just jumping into founding a business and then learning lessons is one way to do things. I got a lot of the experience that I needed working under others, right? Like learning what I liked and disliked from my leaders. I'd like to highlight one person in particular. Ryan Manoogian was my sales manager at WP Engine. Fantastic dude. We became close friends, when we worked together. In fact, his wife and my ex-wife and I went on a cruise together at one point while he was still my boss, right? And he was a really caring dude. He cared about what was going on at home, but at the same time, he frequently failed to protect me from upper management, right? Because I was a kind of a shoot him from the hip kind of guy. I was a top sales rep, but I was never going to get promoted because I wasn't being developed as a leader. I was being developed as a killer individual contributor, right?
Mm.
Which maybe that's what I should always be, right? But there's strengths and weaknesses in his leadership. in that I wanted to grow, and I don't think he recognized that. But he was a fabulous leader in terms of making me want to stay at the company, making me want to perform, making me care about the team and the product. Those were things that he did really well. Now I've had other leaders in the future, and this is going to be a lot less complimentary, so I'm not going to name them, but people who close doors, right? People who get really up in arms about the way that you dress or the way that you look. People who think they can get around the law by saying off the record, blah blah blah. Like none of that stuff, right? Like so what I've learned from my career prior to becoming a leader is that how you treat people matters. And I know that sounds trite, but let me describe how we treat people at Applied Bioplastics. First and foremost, everybody that works for us is paid well above the fair wage for their experience and position. Now, I have the luxury of having a lot of employees in India and Bangladesh. Many founders would see that as a group of people that they could exploit by paying very low wages. Obviously, because of the market over there, we're paying them less than we'd pay an American, but they're being paid extremely well for their country. We're also one of the first organizations to offer family health insurance in both India and Bangladesh. We also do not do clock in, clock out. We do not set hours. I have ADHD. I work well at really odd hours, right? Like I want to get up super early in the morning and do three people's worth of work for a week in the first 4 hours of the day, and then I'm completely useless for the rest of the day a lot of the time, right? Um, so I get that there are alternative working styles and schedules. So why would I force my employees into a box where 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. is when you have to be productive, whether or not you're good at that, right?
Mm.
And so essentially, by saying, look, here's a project, get it done by this date, I get to treat my people as adults, and they get flexibility in their lives. We also demand that they take time off if a family member is sick, if there's a local election, if they themselves are sick. And for obvious and multiple reasons here, but number one, if your employee takes 2 days off to go take care of a sick child, when they come back, they're not worried about their sick child because their sick child's better, right? So they're going to pay attention to what they're doing rather than being distracted and thinking about the child at home, right? If they don't come in when they're sick, awesome, because they're not getting the rest of my staff sick, right? Especially in the age of pandemics, right? I do not want you in the office if you're sick. And in fact, I don't want you working from home either. I want you to focus on recovery, because when you come back, A, you're going to be grateful to me for giving you time to get better. And B, you will be ready to jump back into work because you didn't stress yourself out further while you were sick, right? And then C, like, as far as the election thing, like we want you to participate in your democracy. We demand, frankly, that you participate in your democracy. The leadership team does it too. Being a citizen is a big part of our values, and so again, it's a requirement that you at least go vote. We don't try to dictate who you vote for, but you need to go do that. You think about it, like the jobs that you've held. I mean, do you get to go fix your car if it breaks down, or does your boss yell at you for being late, right? Because your car broke down. For most people, the answer is going to be the latter, and that makes no sense to me. It's like not like you're the one controlling when your car breaks down. So it just makes a lot more sense to run a business this way. And I'll tell you the effects. I mean, I know this sounds super soft and bleeding heart and stuff like that, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening who are rolling their eyes. But here's a stat that I bet none of them can compete with. We have zero voluntary turnover over 5 years. Zero. It works.
Wow.
And in fact, there's another piece of business that helps with that, which is that a lot of our stuff is trade secreted, right? I don't want people walking around with my secrets in their head if they don't work for me anymore. Right. So by treating them like adults, like human beings, asking them what they need, like part of our salary negotiations aren't, oh, this is the range. If that doesn't work for you, get the hell out. It's what do you need to be comfortable? And we'll pay you that, because we want you to be comfortable so that you're focusing on work and so that you're loyal, so that you stay, right? And so that's, I think, at least for our business. I mean, hey, if you're a turn and burn kind of business and don't care about your reputation or your customers, do whatever you want. But if you're trying to build something that lasts, you'll do it my way.
Ooh, Man, there's so much great nuggets in there. So I'm going to just encourage everyone who's watching this, like this is one you want to watch a couple of times and pull some of these nuggets out. Because especially when it comes to building a great team, there was so many great pieces in there. So Alex, I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
But before we get to some of our rapid fire questions, let's just take a quick moment and look forward. I'm
Sure.
curious, as you kind of cast the vision for the next 3 to 5 years, what do you see? What are you most excited about? Kind of where's the business heading over the next handful of years?
Sure. So let's actually extend that timeline because the next 3 to 5 years are going to be a lot more of the same. We're going to continue licensing to new compounders. We're going to continue to prove our value in multiple different industries. We're already working with a bunch of auto OEMs and agricultural OEMs like tractor makers and other things like that. We're working with the government on shipping pallets. It's all boring stuff that goes into everything you use every day, but it's not the most exciting thing that we're going to do. I want to talk about the next 20 years. And I'll tell you the two major things that are going to happen here. The first one is that, we're likely not going to exit the business. This isn't a lifestyle business. It is going to have billions in revenue within the next couple years, simply because licensing allows us a very wide reach with very low costs. And that essentially guarantees that if our stuff works, which it does, it's already being sold. It's going to be huge. Right. So making lots of money might be exciting to some. I am more excited about changing the way that the plastic industry does things, in particular, the bioplastic industry. Right. I mentioned the things that the bioplastic industry does wrong. I'd like to see Applied Bioplastics become the center of gravity for the bioplastics world, essentially saying, look, the way we do it is the way it should be done. Let us acquire you and we'll make your plastic go worldwide using our technique, right? Or let us partner with you because your plastic's too expensive and our feedstock's really inexpensive. Let's combine those two things so that you're able to compete with commodity prices, right? So you don't have to become part of Applied Bioplastics, but we'll certainly partner with you if you run a bioplastics company and help you get those prices down and that sustainability up, right? So I think that becoming is one of the more exciting things that's going to happen over the next 20 years. The other thing that's going to happen over the next 20 years, and I'm going to have to be careful about this one. We've recently got word that a grant that we proposed has been accepted. The paperwork's not complete yet, but I'm going to kind of outline the terms here. It's for the refugee housing side, just to preface this. But essentially, we are going to bring in over 20 years, $2 billion in grants from a couple different organizations that actually solicited this proposal. That $2 billion in grants is going to go to create micro facilities all over several geographic areas that I shouldn't name yet, that will produce micro facilities that produce our refugee housing composite. This will be used for low-income housing, both in the villages that we establish the micro facilities as well as the surrounding ones. It will be consuming both local agricultural waste and local labor, and will be owned by the community itself, not by me or Applied Bioplastics. We take a 0.7% margin on this housing that will be spread around the world. In this one area of the world that this project is focused on, we're going to create $80 billion in economic activity over, with $2 billion in investment, essentially. We're going to create over 1.1 million jobs that are permanent for this area, not temporary jobs. There will be a lot of temporary jobs like construction that will pop up because of this. But the facilities will also be co-located with two more startups that are doing waste to methane for power, as well as one that does waste to ethanol for cooking fuel. Right. So we'll be providing power, cooking fuel, and housing. And here's the real kicker. I love burying the lead. It's always exciting for me. But we're going to build 700 million human beings worth of housing in the next 20 years with this program. That is most of the people on Earth who need a house. And the reason that the proposal is exactly 20 years and no more, no less, is I'm going to share something a little bit personal here. So, just trigger warning for health issues or whatever else like that, disability. But I was diagnosed last year with a pretty horrible autoimmune disorder and found out about 6 months ago that it's going to end my life a lot earlier than I thought. I was in a wheelchair for a decent part of last year, and I was given a choice while I was still in the wheelchair by my physician, who said, look, you can exist in the wheelchair for the next 30 years or so, only 30 because being in a wheelchair shortens your life. You can't be as active, you can't move around as much. But the other option is that I can give you a double handful of pills every morning, 2 injections in the stomach twice a month, and 4 injections in your butt every week. But if you do all these things, you'll get to walk again on a cane for the next 15 to 20 years. The drugs I'm going to give you are going to destroy your organs, and you won't be eligible for transplants because you're on these medications. So choose, essentially. I chose option number two. I need to be active. I'm a really active dude. You can visit my website at consequential.co, where we only work on things that matter, that include applied bioplastics and refugee movies and other things like that. We also have a couple political action committees working on laws that I think are important to get passed. What this has done for me, this diagnosis and this radical shortening of timelines for everything is two things. One, it's freed me from several things that I think most people are tied to, which is number one, I'm likely not going to get married again. I certainly won't have children in order to not pass down this horrible, genetic disorder that I have. I won't buy a home. The house you see behind me is rented and always will be. And I won't retire. So missing out on a large chunk of the older human experience is something that I'm now replacing with building my legacy. As I mentioned, becoming that center of gravity for the bioplastics world, becoming that company that has put roofs over more heads than any organization in history. So I've been freed from the financial and time constraints of those things that I mentioned, those human experiences, and been given the opportunity to scrawl my values across the face of the earth with this company, right? So I think that an exciting thing that's going to happen in the next 20 years is the end of my life. But I've already picked a successor. I've got a rich life insurance policy that benefits Applied Bioplastics, and I'm certain that these people that I've carefully chosen over the last 6 years will carry my vision to fruition past that time.
Hmm. Alex, I just gotta say thank you so much for sharing, that piece of the story with us. It really speaks volumes to the passion and everything that you've just uh, exuded since we've kind of gotten on this call. And it is just absolutely fantastic to see how you've dedicated and continue to dedicate your life towards true impact in this world. So it is really cool to see that, and I'm super excited.
Thank you.
Um, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground on this call, and I know that I could probably sit here and talk your ear off for another 2 hours if we had the time.
Ditto.
Um,
Definitely.
but I want to shift over to at least just a couple rapid fire questions to pull some additional wisdom nuggets out. If the audience hasn't already found a handful of really good nuggets already, I want to give them a handful more that we can just kind of ease out for them.
Certainly.
And kind of the first one here is when you look at kind of your journey from an early career to founding this company and kind of where you're at and where you're headed, what would you say for you has kind of been your key to success?
Grit and an immense capacity for pain. I'll just tell a really quick story on, like my childhood. I was born to two physicians who were both perfectionists and wanted pure compliance from their children. Now, my sister did exactly that. She did exactly what she was told, got straight A's, all that kind of stuff. I was the resistant one. And when they escalated punishment, I would escalate the misbehavior to absolutely absurd lengths. And they never understood that punishing me wasn't going to work because, like my very tough mother who broke powerlifting records in college, so she's also got a very high capacity for pain. She never understood that I was just like her, and I have an infinite capacity for pain. In order to make sure that I pay my employees on time, I haven't gotten paid in the last 8 months. Neither has my co-founder, and that's how we do things, right? So having to live on very little, I mean, literally beans and rice at 34. I've been broke as a joke for years, right? There's tons of things that I wanted to do that I've had to miss out on. So what I would say is come with your mental toughness, right? If you don't have that, you don't belong to being an entrepreneur. I hate to be harsh, but I hate it when cool people have really cool ideas but don't have the persistence to make it happen, because then they fail, right? And that idea goes down the drain. If you can't do it, find somebody else who's got a very high capacity for pain, partner with them, and get it done.
Mm. Which I usually my next question is like one piece of advice. So it's slightly different than kind of what
Sure.
has worked and what key to success would be for you. But if you could leave just one additional piece of advice for other entrepreneurs out there today, what piece of
Come
advice
with
did you want to leave them?
come with capital.
Mm,
So when I was filming the movie, I spent all of that $500,000, and I then spent another $250,000 that I didn't have. I really wanted the movie to be good, and movies are expensive to make, and I was the sole funder. So I put myself $250,000 in debt and then started a company. Don't do that. That's the wrong way to go. Look, I realize that this is sort of a privileged take. Not everybody has, friends and family with money. I was able to raise about $100,000 from my friends and extended family. My co-founder was able to raise about the same amount from his family. So we started the business with about not quite $250,000, but that was enough to run us for the first year and a half, right? So I would plan your capital sources first. Before beginning the company, and then spend some time pitching those people and seeing what their level of interest is, because you're going to need money a lot faster than you think. There's just too much to do. You need help, right? So you need funding to get that help. So go do that first. And then if at all possible, go get some customers before you go get some investors. Like get your initial investors, friends and family. People aren't going to harass you for updates. But do also try and get some customers at least on board or interested before you go out to get capital. It makes the negotiations a hell of a lot easier when you're not completely over a barrel in front of the VC, because
ooh,
they'll take everything. They absolutely will. In fact, I was just talking to somebody who's venture studio helps you get off the ground, right? Takes 50%, and founders sign up for this. And I'm like, why the F would you do that? Right? Really, really. Why would you give away half of whatever your life's work is just to get off the ground? So
mm-hmm.
so go find those early customers if it's at all possible for your business to do so.
Dang, those are some good pieces of advice. Um, One more rapid fire question. We'll kind of get into how folks can connect and learn more and all that. But
Sure.
book recommendations. Any book recommendations that you would have for the audience? Could be something that you're reading currently, read recently, listen to if you're not a big like actual reader, podcast, anything else like that. But any recommendations you'd give?
Sure, absolutely. So, God, I have a long list, but um, I would say that something you need to know, especially if you're American, is how America works. This is outside of business. I would say that this is a political book, but it's also a data book, and it helps you understand the way that people work and the way that the system in this country works. I think it'll encourage you to get a wider perspective on who to hire and things like that. And that is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Completely changed my political views on its own. In that vein, We Were 8 Years in Power by oh my gosh, I've just forgotten his name. We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That's the author there. That's Coates. For those of you who might have trouble spelling the first name, and so those are non-business books that I would recommend. Beyond that, The Beautiful Exchange: How Trade Shaped the World is another kind of big picture how things work kind of book that you ought to read. And then every business leader suggests this one. I found it good. Not entirely like, don't take the whole thing as gospel, but Radical Ownership is a great book. And I hope I can curse on this because it's in the title, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck is
Mm-hmm.
is the last business book that I will take. And the last thing I'd suggest is, outside of books, go get a therapist. If you're planning on starting a business, have somebody to talk to. It's one of the loneliest jobs in the world. Like I said, I like making friends with my employees, but there's a barrier there. They're my employees that, pleasing me, as much as I try to stay away from that. It depends on what their job, right? Like their job could depend on whether or not they please me. So, and not that I would ever treat them that way, but from their perspective, that's how it is, right? So you need somebody to talk to. You absolutely do. And it can't just be another founder, because they're not trained to handle the level of stress you're going to be under. They're under just as much stress as you are, and you're dumping on them. You're not being a good friend, right? So get a therapist, please.
Mm, dang, that is incredibly wise words and something that we 100% recommend because you hit it right on the head there with the business ownership in general is one of the loneliest things out there, and the vast majority of the population just doesn't understand some of the challenges and issues and frustrations and every emotion that comes along with it. So I 100% agree with that recommendation.
Think about it. For us, we have this opportunity to house 700 million people, and we've nearly run out of money a few times. How do you think I feel when I'm tripping at the finish line of such an enormous and impactful opportunity? Does it not feel like I'm letting 200 million families down with my own failures, right?
Mm,
That's something you need to talk to somebody about. Nobody can share that burden with you.
yeah. So for those that want more information, that want to follow along this amazing journey that you're currently on and will continue to extend for the next handful of years,
Yeah.
where can they go for more information? How can they connect with you if they want to connect?
Certainly.
Where can we advise them to go?
So I do not maintain social media other than LinkedIn. There may be some old artifacts of when I participated in social media, but personally, I think it's poison. It's bad for your brain. It's proven to be bad for your brain. In fact, I work with Joe Toscano from time to time, the guy who wrote the algorithm for Facebook, and he's as the author of that algorithm, he says, please don't use it. It's really, really bad for you. So to that end, follow me on LinkedIn. My URL is Alex Applied Bio, at the usual LinkedIn IRL, or URL, excuse me. You can also follow Applied Bioplastics on LinkedIn. Visit my website at consequential.co, where we only do things that matter, and see all of my other projects. And feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I will not give out my email on podcasts, but it's pretty easy to figure out once you figure out what the naming scheme of everything else is. Other than that, hey, set a Google alert for my name. I'll be making news.
Cool, I love that. For those that are watching, I do recommend go on LinkedIn, send a direct message, say, "Hey, saw you in the business spotlight." Amazing conversation, because it is, yeah, for us here. This is primarily here in Central Texas. Being able to make some additional connections is always a big piece of it. So please take a moment, go do that once we wrap up the conversation. But Alex, I've got one final question for you, and it's the way I always like to end kind of these conversations here, and that is, what is most inspiring to you today?
Death. Um, to be completely honest with you, man, I mean, I think that a lot of people don't see their own mortality, and I think that's a good thing, in a lot of cases, right? Like the reason we invented religion is because of the terror of a thinking being, of the end of that thinking, right? There's tons of philosophy on this. I'm not going to try to quote it because I'll get it wrong, but thinking about your own death is often distressing, right? But what we don't realize, what we do think of is dying old and surrounded by family and stuff like that. But odds are that and I hope it's not true, but odds are that somebody listening to this podcast is going to die a lot sooner than they thought. And so I would encourage everyone listening and everyone around the world to consider the fact that, like, you could have a Boeing airplane part fall on your head at any given moment. You could walk in front of a bus, right? So you should live in a way that you're proud of. You should live in a way that inspires you about yourself and what you're doing. And I know that that's a bit of a privilege take. Some people are stuck in crappy jobs and can't get out, but use your spare time. Read, learn, connect with other people, spend time making your life rich, because death is coming. And I have the dubious honor of knowing that more than most, right? And a lot sooner than I'd hoped. But that motivates me to do all the things I do. It gives me the engine and the drive to accomplish and achieve what Applied Bioplastics and my other projects have achieved over the last few years. So yeah, death.
What a phenomenal answer. Alex, thank you so much for being here and taking the time. It's been a genuine pleasure to get to know kind of your story, the work that y'all are up to, and I know I, for one, will be paying attention to all the things you'll be making news on here in the future. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Tanner, for the opportunity, the invitation, and for the great questions.